we would like to give the floor for our consistent volunteer speaker coming from Finland, Dr. Eetu Karvonen. Coach, the floor is yours.
This first hour or 50 minutes, or however I end up talking, is about me. And of course, this is the hardest topic for a Finnish guy because we don't really like to discuss about ourselves and our accomplishments. But at the moment, I'm, of course, a coach, and I've been professionally coaching for the past more than 10 years now, like 12 years already, and as a kind of a hobby, semi-professionally 10 years prior to that. But at the same time as I was already coaching, I was also a swimmer, and I used to look like that. I hope I would still be as looking as powerful as I was, and my best stroke was breaststroke. And when Dennis asked me to discuss about this, I thought, okay, how should I approach it? And I think it would be the best to kind of go through my whole career, as I understand that there are some swimmers and maybe some parents listening, to kind of see what the development and the path to at least to an international level swimming kind of looks like. I was not a Michael Phelps. I was not Leon Marchand. I never got any international medals, but I did swim at European champ final in short course, and also World Championship semi-final on long course, and in few relays in finals as part of the Finnish team, at least on European level. I don't really remember because it already about 20 years ago when I started to swim at the international scene. Everybody has a start, and I'm probably aging myself here, but I started swimming in the 80s. So 1989, my dad's colleagues or work colleagues' daughter was a swimming coach or kind of a learn to swim swimming teacher, and they asked whether I wanted to learn how to swim. So I actually started to swim in a club at age 3. So I am 40 years old now, and I started like a structure training at age 3, which is of course very, very young, not very typical in Finland. But apparently I was so excited about it that I already competed in 50 freestyle in 1990. So I remember this is my first competition, and even then I had a massive trust in myself because my mother always tells me that right after that meet, I only talked about this competition and how I won it. And of course, I was dead last because there was nobody else who was as young as I was. But luckily, or perhaps unluckily, depending on which point of view you take, but this was the golden age of Finnish swimming. So I'm from Finland, and we have two basically massive swimmers from the 90s, Antti Kasvio, who got an Olympic bronze medal in 200 freestyle in 1992. And at the same competition, another swimmer, Jani Sievinen, was fourth in 200 IM. And right at that point, when I was about 6, 7, 8 years old, they were bringing some hardware from every competition, from European champs, from world championships, from Olympics. And then in 1994, Jani beat the world record in 200 IM. And he actually held it for, I believe, for 9 years until Michael Phelps was the first one to actually break it. And of course, in Finnish swimming, this was completely unprecedented. There was no elite swimming before Jani and Antti, and really never since. So this was the boom of Finnish swimming, and really it was these competitions that kind of set my life path, because at age 8, it was clear to me what I was going to be. I never became the best in the world, but I do remember that at that age, I made the decision that I want to be the same as Jani and Antti was. And the great thing, and again, it's dependable on from which country you are, But these guys, I could see them every month. So there's, of course, competitions going on every month in Finland. And if you chose the competition correctly, you could actually swim against Jani, you could swim against Antti, these like super swimmers, and you kind of identified into what they were. And at the time, maybe from like, unfortunately, the training paradigm in Finland and for the next 20 years, and I think this will be quite clearly one of the reasons why I didn't quite get where I wanted before I actually came to the US and trained, was that they trained extremely hard and a lot. So the paradigm of swimming, I remember growing up, was just that more was better. And when I was really, really young, I remember swimming 10 kilometers during Christmas time and during New Year's, and every holidays were basically just about swimming. But again, this kind of approach to swimming at such a young age also insisted on me the value of hard work. Maybe the work wasn't really smart, but at the same time, nothing really came easy. And since you had these stories in Finland at the time of Jani and Antti and how much they trained and how hard they were working towards it and how they put their whole life into it, we had a whole generation of boys and girls just like me who kind of jumped into that same type of programming. And I think it won't happen again probably in Finland. So of course these were generational talents. But since we have the internet now, like one of the first things that I usually try to insist on my swimmers that I coach, who are age groupers and juniors mostly, is that since we have YouTube, we have Instagram, we have all of this social media, that we can actually relate and identify ourselves into the great swimmers all around the world. So I was lucky at that time that we had these two great swimmers. If you're not so lucky that you have great swimmers in your country, it really doesn't matter, because you can open up the YouTube and watch the newest Caleb Dressel video on how to dolphin kick and stuff like that, which of course at the time it was not available. We had to go to the actual competition and see how Antti was swimming freestyle and then try to copy that as much as we could actually remember. I was fairly talented, at least from like a Finnish perspective. Of course, the level of swimming, other than these two great swimmers, was not really great. But of course, since I was all in swimming, I was extremely dominant in Finnish age group swimming. So I won not every event, but almost every event at age group nationals, from like age 11 all the way to age 14. However, looking back into it, it was quite clear why I won. It probably wasn't really the training and the hard work mentality. It was the fact that I grew up really, really fast. So I was about this tall as I'm right now at age 14 when I was in the year 2000. So that was kind of like my peak height came really, really early. And after the year like 2000, 2001, it was much, much harder. And then this early success also kind of trickled down to even like open competitions. So in 2001, when I was 15, I got my first medals from the adult Finnish nationals. So I got a silver medal in 200 breaststroke, long course. I think I swam 226. And everybody who knows about swimming, that's not really a fast time, because girls and women swim 219 nowadays. But at the time in Finland, you could get a silver with that. And I swam 108 for 100 breaststroke. And I got a bronze. And I think this was kind of my peak with this normal kind of approach into swimming that we had in Finland at the time, because nobody talked about technique. Nobody talked about rest and recovery, nutrition, anything like that. It was just all about who can swim the most, and this will make you the best you can be. And from 2001, I actually got my first plateau. And I think the plateau, again, is just a natural part of your growth stopping. And this came really, really early for me. And I did not improve pretty much at all in the next, I would say, 3 years. And the real reason for that was that in 2001, when I got those medals, of course, me and my coach at the time started thinking about I can actually be really, really good. And we probably doubled my training. So at age 15, I was already training like 9 times a week. And then once I started hitting 16, I started training 12 times a week of swimming plus all the dry land. And after about 4 months of doing that stuff, both of my shoulders became really, really painful. And then I got them MRI'd, and they could see that I pretty much had swam my shoulders out from my body. So they were just hanging on a thread. And I had my first shoulder surgery in 2003. So I was age 17 at the time, and then another one, which I then had to have. And I already knew that in age 18 in 2004. However, one of the things that I realized during the time that I was waiting to get these surgeries was that my only improvement in swimming, and I am not really complaining here, it will all come as a kind of a lesson in the later years, came when I could not train. So we were training extremely hard, 90 kilometers per week, and all of this stuff that was done in the early 2000s. And then I hurt my shoulder and I couldn't swim for about like 6 or 8 weeks, only do kicking. And that was the only improvement I made from 2001 all the way up to 2005. Of course, I couldn't compete when I had my shoulder surgeries, but I remember this, that I dropped like 3 seconds after not training. And this was like the first glimpse of the future, how I actually should train, and also my like coaching understanding, also for age groupers, that it's good to work really, really hard and you're building that capacity. But at some point in your career, you also have to kind of utilize what you already built. And that requires a bit of different type of training. When I was, of course, recovering from my shoulder surgeries, I became probably one of the best breaststroke kickers in the world. And I think this was very, very useful. But unfortunately, since this was the early 2000s, I did get a knee injury, which is still kind of part of my life every day. So one of the lessons there is that there is such a thing that recovery that you do need. And I tended to, throughout my career, the problem was always doing too much. And really, even the lesson of screwing up my shoulders really didn't teach me that I can't recover from all the training in the world. And unfortunately, did not teach my coaches at the time either. And I would say the first kind of smart training approach that came to Finland was actually brought here by these guys called Milton Elms and Bill Boomer in 2005. And I remember my coach actually attending this clinic. And after this clinic, our training kind of changed almost completely. So before that, we did not talk about technique at all here in Finland. It was all about hard training, but then Milt and Bill really kind of brought in this technical approach to training. So we were still training a lot. I don't think the physiological training, the fitness training changed much, but we started to actually film our technique and doing different kind of drills and approaching it from a little bit different point of view, which really came at a good time. And this goes back to these ideas that over the years, as you're training and going through your career, something needs to change so you can push your improvement forward. Because after my shoulder surgeries and then having this knee injury, it was quite clear that I could not approach swimming the same way as I did as a teenager, because I just couldn't do it because of my injuries. And then when Milton Bill kind of brought this new kind of thinking in the Finnish swimming, I started improving again. And I would say that when I was about 20 years old, so 2006, this was the best swimming year of my life. So in short course, I improved more than 2 seconds. So I went first time under 1 minute in short course. And, 20 years ago, this was a quite good time to 59.2 and then 200 to 210. And I had kind of similar improvements in long course. Not as great improvements, but still quite solid. And this was also the first year that I started to qualify for international competitions. So 2005, I went to my first short course Europeans, and then 2006 long course Europeans. And then I pretty much went to those competitions every year since then. Never made, unfortunately, the Olympics as a swimmer, 3 times as a coach already, but never as a swimmer. I was just always like couple tenths off from the qualifications at the time in 2008 and 2012. However, once I did get these initial improvements in 2005 and 2006, there was really no improvement in the next 3 years that followed. So again, it was kind of the same pattern for me. We found a way to train, and I did get good improvements for 2 years. But after that 2 years, I was already an adult. I could not get any more improvements. So I pretty much stagnated at the same level. And actually, for the 100 breaststroke time, it took me 6 years to improve that again. Of course, again, in 2009, we had the jacket suits, and that's where I swam my all-time fastest in 50 breaststroke. Unfortunately, it's with the suit. And this again came after really, really non-traditional training, which I should have at the time understood that I was a sprinter. So we were still training. Well, looking back at it, we were training towards like a 400 breaststroke, but we were training towards 200 breaststroke, and we didn't really think about the 50 because, again, 20 years ago, it wasn't that kind of an event, especially here in Europe. But I do remember trying to qualify for the World Championships in 2009, and I had the suit, I had everything, and we tapered for like 2 competitions. I could not break the qualification time, and after the last taper, I got some kind of a flu, and I didn't swim for 3 weeks. And again, still using the same suit, I went to a competition and improved more than a second in my 50 because of all of this rest that I actually got through tapering and then not swimming. Again, kind of pointing me into that direction that, man, you should be a sprinter. But at the time, the culture was such that sprinters really didn't exist in Finland. But that was a great improvement. Well, at 2009, I made the decision, hopefully, to actually move to US. And since I was already 23 years old, I couldn't go to American college, or at least I thought I couldn't, because I did send my resume to Division I colleges, if you know what that means, but the highest level of collegiate swimming in the US, and they all told me that I was too old. So I had to go non-traditional route, and I knew this coach from Portland, Oregon, Alex Nikitin, and I asked whether I could come there and go to the Portland State University. So I actually went to the US and I trained with the club first for a couple of years and went to the college as a traditional student. And this was also very different kind of training that I had used to. And to a very high level, I think Alex is still like the major mentor for me as a coach, because I do prescribe to this kind of really thoughtful progression of training throughout the years, not in the same way as Alex, but unfortunately it was a club, so I was training with kids that were like 7, 8 years younger than me, and it was still having this kind of distance training orientation. So I unfortunately did not improve in the first 2 years that I spent with Alex, although I think the training was great. It was just scaled a little bit too much on that endurance side. But I think one of the biggest breakthroughs that I ever did was in the later side of that 2 years. So I tried to qualify again for the World Championships with Alex. I could not do it. We tapered for two competitions. In the first competition, I went 221. In the second competition, in 200 breaststroke, I went 218. And then I came back to Finland for summer vacation. And for the first time in my life, I trained on my own. And this goes back to, again, this idea that I trained extremely hard with Alex in Portland. And then I started training on my own. And I did improve my 200 breaststroke by 4 seconds to 2:14:41. And that is my lifetime best. I did that as a 25-year-old swimmer. And at that point, I kind of realized that I could actually coach myself better than anyone. Not because I knew more than Alex or anybody like that, but because I was a quite old swimmer who was still having this passion and a belief that I am a better swimmer than I'm actually showing in competitions. I just have to find a better way to train. And by the luck of draw, uh, then a Division 2 college, and I didn't even know that this existed at the time, that there's a lower level of collegiate university swimming in the US. And from one of those colleges, from Grand Canyon University, head coach Steve Schaefer, out of the blue, called me and asked me whether I wanted to be part of his team. And this was probably the best next 2 years, and actually next 5 years of my life. But I spent there 2 years as a swimmer under him. And one of the first things that Steve told me at the time was that he doesn't really care how I train, and he only cares whether I perform at the competitions. And he knew my story, he knew my background and everything, and how I did this 214 to training alone. And this was kind of the first time in my life where I was allowed to train as a sprinter. And then I immediately started improving. And that's the year where I started to break that 28 barrier every meet. In 2012 and 2013, I improved my 100 breaststroke. I won the Division 2 college competition in the US, I think 5 times, so 4 times individually. And then we won one relay, broke records, finished records, everything like that. And I was already 26 and then 27 years old. So I had to try to find myself and the way to train for 10 years. And of course, nowadays, I think coaches are much more willing to work with the individual to really find their strengths. But at the time in Finland and even in the US, they were not really willing to accept that some people are sprinters. They might need different kind of training, but Coach Steve Schaefer really he allowed me. He didn't force me to swim 200 breaststroke. Of course, I did this in yards, but in long course, I was pretty much done with it. But just dropping that from my program allowed me to really, really excel in these events. And I swam under Steve until 2013, and that's when I graduated with my bachelor's degree and kind of became an assistant, graduate assistant as a coach. I still kind of trained in 2014, and with very little training, I was still able to improve 100 breaststroke short course, and this is the Finnish record, 58:37. Not anymore, because my own swimmer has broken it, but that was like my final swim as a swimmer. So I stopped swimming at age 28 just because of financial situation. And I also went to a graduate program and PhD program after that while I was coaching. But really, the highlights of my swimming career came really, really late. But I think looking back on it, had I come to Grand Canyon University straight from high school, I probably would have had a very, very different swimming career, because I only found my way of training and my strengths as a swimmer at a quite an old age. So that is my story in swimming. Hopefully I didn't bore anybody, but I swam for 25 years or 24 years competitively. And what I could really learn from these 24 years is, again, that fact that you have to find your way, either yourself or with the coach, to actually improve and rely on the strengths that you have, and that the development isn't really linear. So we all want to think that development is that, okay, from year to year to year, you keep improving. But in reality, if you look at my career, I have these periods where the training shifted somehow, where I'm improving really, really fast, but then unfortunately, years and years of grinding the same results year after year, and it all kind of boils down to not changing stuff. So I think one of the things that maybe everybody can learn from this lecture, not really the swimmers, but if there's any coaches listening, is that as the swimmers are aging and their body is changing, something needs to change. If you keep doing the same stuff, then most likely you will plateau, especially after you start or stop growing. And I just quickly try to kind of think about what I really learned within my swimming career. And please don't do it like I did. Like I don't resent my swimming career, but I always think that I could have probably been better under some different hands. But I don't blame my coaches, because in Finland at the time, it was the prevailing culture was all about distance swimming, and I was not really suited for that. But the mistakes that I really made was that once I got that initial kind of taste of success at adult level at age 14, 15, I thought that if I just trained twice more without anything else changing in my life in terms of recovery or nutrition or the approach that I take, I will get to the top. And unfortunately, that is not the way it goes, because there is no way to expedite progress. If you're training 5 times a week as a 13-year-old, it's not like if you double that and start training 10 times a week when you're 14, that you will improve at double the rate. Maybe initially, but at some point you will pay it, either as an injury or overtraining, or just kind of improving and using all your resources too fast. So what I would like to do, and what I do as a coach, is always this smooth progression throughout the age group and junior years, and thinking in terms of 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Because for a lot of swimmers, it might seem like a hill that you will never be able to actually walk up to. So let's say you're a 13-year-old 100 freestyler and you're swimming in a minute right now, and to be successful at an international level, you need to go 47. And it might seem that there's no way to do that, but there is. But there's no way to do that in 1 year. And it doesn't matter what you do, you can't do it in 1 year. But we underestimate what you can do in 5 years or 10 years. Really, the secret of swimming success is just that you need to keep progressing from 1 year to another. And if you're not progressing, you have to think, again, the coaches have to think, the swimmers have to think, okay, what needs to change that you still keep progressing? because of course the progression will never be linear, but that should be the goal. And age group swimming, again, from my perspective, I was really, really successful as a youngster, but this was only because of my really, really fast maturity. So again, at age 14, I was the size that I'm now. I never grew an inch more or a centimeter more. So of course, I'm going to be uh, successful at an age group level. But what I was missing was that skill department. And I think for age group swimmers, and hopefully everybody who's watching this understands that if you want to beat the current champions, the Leon Marchands or Cameron McAvoy's in sprint or something, you need to have better skills that they do. And I think this is the secret of age group swimming, because they will improve and you will improve just because you are growing to be an adult. But if you do it in a way that, like I did it, which was just through hard work without thinking about what swimming is really about, you will probably plateau at some point unless you really lift your ceiling of skills, because that is the time where you're learning how to swim. It is much easier to learn breaststroke or dolphin kicks or backstroke, whatever, at age 13 and 14 than it is on later years like I did when I was age 20 to get this kind of new improvements to go along. And I think this is the major thing why swimming is going forward all the time. But it's good to realize that the best athlete, or the athlete that I would see the most potential at age 15, is not the one who swims the absolute fastest times, but is the one who swims beautifully. Like if I can see a butterflyer whose butterfly looks better than Leon Marchand's, or I can't remember what that Hungarian guy's name, Christoph Milax, that's his name. That's the guy that I know that once they start training harder and they grow, they have a possibility to actually get to that level. And from the other perspective, think the earlier you've also learned the foundational things about, again, that kind of secret training that is not happening in the pool. So how to basically recover, how to go to bed in time to sleep enough, how to eat, how to think about your own development. So again, not just in terms of like success and medals, but about the process of improving your skills and how to approach training as a kind of a never ending progression of learning to be better and all of that stuff. And this is the time for it, because if you're 20 and you start changing the habits in your life, it's going to be an uphill battle. But if you already learned that when you were age 14, that you have your life in order and you know what healthy food is and how to fuel for your training, this is like, that's almost more important than what you do in the pool. And of course, at the base of it, the most important thing is to learn to love the sport. And of course, this is something I did very well in retrospective. Again, thanks to Jani, thanks to Antti, thanks for the golden age of Finnish swimming, because I learned how to love the sport. Obviously, I'm still actively engaged with the sport as a coach. I will do that till the day I die. I love swimming, and I think all of this, not suffering, but all of the tough stuff that I had to go through, I didn't really care about that, because for me it was clear that swimming is my life. So I definitely loved swimming enough that it didn't matter if I didn't improve in competitions or I had a shoulder surgery. It was still clear to me that I was going to swim. And how to develop that, I don't know, but at least I think the environment and your approach towards swimming uh, as kind of a passion project has to be there. And I think coaches, this is kind of the thing that you need to develop, and also parents. If I look at my junior years, again, please don't do it like I did. In retrospective, again, me and the coaches in Finland should have really watched my strengths. So here I am at age 16. Again, I was 190 centimeters with zero strength training. I did no weight training until I went to the US. Well, I wouldn't say zero, but not really any kind of like heavy strength training. It was again from this endurance perspective. And I was still already this 90-kilo hunk of muscle, as you saw maybe on the pictures here early. And still, just because the culture was all about the 1500 freestyle, the 400 IM, 400 free, even breaststroke was kind of seen as a side thing, but definitely there was no sprinting going on, and we couldn't really get ourselves out of this culture. So I think Cameron McAvoy and this new uh, sprinting kind of subculture that you can see in YouTube and Instagram, it's really, really healthy and it's good because it gives people options, which I did not have. But in retrospective, not again for just about sprinting, but in general, we need to find, and you as a swimmer or the coach needs to find the swimmer strength. My strength was always strength and speed and explosiveness and all of this stuff, but I never trained this until I came to the US and Grand Canyon University. Okay, at this time, and you can look at my career, you need to understand that since most people are still growing at this time, and you're also kind of shifting the training towards more adult type approaches, the development that you will experience is not linear. So it's not going to happen the way you want. We all would like to improve our best times at every competition. One competition during the winter time and one competition during the summertime, but that is not how it works. It's almost like if you just keep training and you're training the correct way and you're training your strengths, what you are gifted in, you keep building this kind of capacity in your body. And there are these moments where you kind of tip over the necessary threshold and then you'll drop 2 seconds and 3 seconds. And this is exactly what happened to me. I think the training was not very smart or good, but we kept pushing extremely hard. Maybe I didn't improve in 3 years or 2 years, but then there was always this competition where I all of a sudden got into another level. And still, as a junior, understand that there are these two ceilings in swimming that we are really working. I would say there's almost like three ceilings, the third one being psychological, your mental ceiling. But we will have this physiological ceiling, meaning basically how fit you are. And then we have the technical ceiling. And again, as a junior swimmer, you got to understand that the physiological stuff will plateau at some point. And there's nothing you can do it. You cannot double your training volume to be more fit or, I don't know, do even heavier strength training. You will improve at the rate that you will improve. But what you can do is the technical stuff. And really, as a junior, what I, as a coach nowadays, would like to see is that this technical stuff goes ahead of the physical stuff. Because then you know that there's something you can always improve from the fitness side. You can swim more, you can swim more often, you can swim with higher intensity. But if you're not technically, again, better than the best swimmers at the time or right now, then you're never going to reach their level. So as a junior, always remember what swimming is about. It's about those skills. And again, find improvements in training. And eventually, even if it feels like that you're on a plateau and any competition you go and you don't find that you are getting the results that you want, understand that they will come if you find improvements in training. So I talk about the technical stuff, but also the training stuff. Like eventually, if you are better aerobically, like endurance wise, you're faster, you're stronger, you have better technique, you will be better at competitions. But we just don't know when that happens. But if you know, and nowadays we know what level the best swimmers in the world are training, you can go and check out Bob Bowman's Texas group, what kind of practices they're doing. And if you see this, you can keep this as the level that you need to master. And if you get there in the training, it's just a matter of time until you also get the competitive results. Yeah. And what I want to end with today, and then I'll open the floor for some questions because I think this will be much more better than just me talking here, is that the question in my mind, because I was kind of reflecting what made me swim for, again, 25 years. Most of the time, it was not going the way I wanted. And I only really found the magic when I was 25, 26, 27 years old, when I started hitting these 27s on long course and did this to 26.9. Which again nowadays is not fast, but again at the time was really really good like international level swimming. Is that I am not really sure motivation is enough. You need that intrinsic enjoyment, or may I say, love of the process of improving yourself. In this case, in swimming, at least for me, also this understanding of how this process goes, like understanding that training is not about how much you swim or how hard you swim. All of those stuff is a part of it, but it's really a process of improving yourself. Now in swimming there's an end goal, but it's the same end goal in schooling or in your job or relationship or anything like that. But it's about the process of falling in love in improving yourself through swimming. Because the competition goal, like when I was 8 years old and I was imagining myself winning an Olympic gold medal, that is just like a spark. And if that's the only thing that motivates you, you will not swim until you're 25 or until you're even 20 years old. But if you love going to the training and seeing whether you can be better today than you were yesterday, and you also love the fact that if you were not better today than you were yesterday, of thinking about, okay, how can I get better the day after, next week, next month? I think this is like the unlock. This is the key for swimming success. And unfortunately, nobody else, and I'm talking for the swimmers, can do this for you. It is your coach can, of course, help by being just a good human being to motivate you, but you have to find it from within yourself to get really interested about your own swimming, because we almost everybody in the world are training within a group. And if you try to kind of outsource your motivation and your process to your coach, it will never work, because they have to divide their attention to dozens of swimmers, if it's a big group, but at least into multiple swimmers. And it is really the locus of control of your own swimming is always on yourself. And in that, you need that belief, because everybody can improve. I remember the first time somebody told me that I won't get to the international level was when I was about 15 or 16, when I first kind of plateaued in my results. And again, in Finland at the time, people were telling me that I was an age group star, but because I was already big, there was no way for me to improve. And I do think that under the same training that I did as an age grouper, it would have happened. But because I was lucky, Milton Bill Boomer came to Finland. They changed my training, or their influence changed the training that we did. I got that improvement. And then finally in the US, Alex, and then finally Steve Schaefer and American colleges that changed my training. And those were the places where I started to improve. But again, looking back, if you can do this earlier, so you don't have to wait for like 6 years to improve your 100 like I did, but just to understand that if you're just trying to find a way to keep progressing, everybody can find it. Like, I don't believe that there's no ceiling, that if you're not tall enough or I don't know, big enough in general, or you didn't do some kind of training when you were young, etc., you can always improve. You can always improve your endurance or your speed, your strength, your technique. That's all moldable. You can do that, but at the foundation level, you have to believe that that is true. It is a factual statement that is true, but it doesn't matter if your coach tells it to you. It has to come from you. You have to believe that you can do it. And if you want to be the best in the world, you actually have to believe that you can do it better than anybody else. And this is quite of a big thought for a 15-year-old. But I remember that I did think of this at that time. I don't know where it came from. Again, probably from those early experiences with the golden age of Finnish swimming. But nowadays, you can kind of find that belief from social media. Again, social media in a way is a bad thing, but for this, I think it's only positive. And then finally, again, for most people, swimming is not going to be about medals or records. I broke Finnish swimming records, so I got this. I got those college NCAA medals or wins and records. I got loads of Finnish medals, but I never got international competition medals. But what I did get it was, again, this process of improvement. So when I went to my master studies, when I went to my doctoral studies, this seemed quite easy because it was the exact same stuff that I've been doing my whole life in swimming. Having a goal, an end goal, and then tinkering with the process, trying different ways to study to get there as fast as possible. So it really is like a microcosm of life. So even if you don't become the best swimmer in the world, it doesn't matter because it's still teaching you something valuable. So Dennis, I think I'm done with this part of the lecture. I would like some questions if there's anything anybody wants to ask.
But today, who do you watch, Eetu? Do you follow a lot of things on the internet, but who do you look for some insights with your coaching or the practices or things of that nature?
Well, lately, I've of course been watching all of the sprint discussion, Cameron McAvoy, listening to those podcasts. Unfortunately, I can't say there's any like really, really good coaching discussion other than this one podcast. Probably it doesn't matter to many, but it's a plugin. I don't get it. That's the name of the podcast, and you can go to Spotify to learn to find it. It's Nate McKay and Kyle Johnson. Those are the swim coaches who hold it. They have pretty good discussions. I enjoy that. But other than that, I of course have multiple coaches here in Finland, and of course also overseas in the US that I can always coach and kind of ask when I don't know what to actually do with my swimmers.
And then how can people follow what you're doing in their programs?
Well, I do have a YouTube channel. So Dennis keeps saying that I'm the Finnish national coach. I'm retired Finnish national coach in 2025. So right now I'm just a regular old club coach here in Finland who doesn't get much paid much for doing that. And then I have an online business, again, for coaching, for coaches education, all this kind of stuff. And related to that, I have a YouTube channel. But on that YouTube channel, to actually get some views, I mainly talk for triathletes and master swimmers. But I think the same principles that I talk there, can not directly be applied to competitive age group swimmers, but indirectly. And what I mean by that is that if I suggest a program to train 3 times a week, just multiply it by 3, and then you're probably in the right number.
Tell us about your parents and your family, your siblings, or your spouse. That's always important, the way the family dynamics work.
Yeah, so my dad is also kind of an almost made it ice hockey player. So he played ice hockey in the, I guess, late 60s, early 70s. And just one level down from the professional leagues here in Finland. So he didn't make it, which of course makes me hate ice hockey and everything related to it. And this is a normal kind of dynamic. So I think this kind of goal-oriented approach towards sports was already insisted me when I was a kid, but I can't say that they never really forced me into sports or anything like that. Like that was not the dynamic at all, but they could see that I was not really a normal kid, and I was not normal kid or normal teenager. I was all about swimming 100%. Like my whole life revolved around swimming. I didn't mention, but I read my first swimming related book and sports science related book in 1997 when I was 11. And from that year on, I only asked money from my mother to order. They had these VH tapes. They had not Mike Barrow, Ed Moses tapes. I remember those. Then they had Auburn Sprint Secrets VHS tapes. And I got all of those when I was age, 12, 13, 14. And that's all I watched at that age. So they could see that I was extremely passionate about swimming, and they pretty much gave everything that I needed to support that. So I wish I had done a little bit better in swimming just to kind of honor that, but it wasn't the case. And if we talk about right now, my wife is not from swimming, which is probably a good thing. She could care less about swimming, but I did meet her at a swimming pool. So again, a good reason to coach on deck as well.
And then, how are your knees and shoulders these days? You said you have problems with the knees. Sorry about that.
Yes. So my right knee has pretty much been injured since those years when I had my shoulder surgeries. But again, I can give you an example. And again, please, nobody does this. But when I had my shoulder surgery, because of the incision, I had to be out from the pool for 4 weeks. And after that, I spent 6 months kicking with my arm. Nowadays, they don't even do this, but at the time, the techniques were not as sophisticated. So I taped my arm into my body, and we did 2 sessions per day, 2 hours of kicking every day, of course, so 6 days a week. And on top of that, I rode a stationary bike in Finland because it's obviously snowing on the ground otherwise, every day for a couple of hours. Plus, I did gym, 3 times, or not really gym, but this kind of circuit training on it. So it's not surprising that I injured my knee at the time, and I really never really got over it. And of course, the problem is that even when my shoulder became healthy, I just continued swimming breaststroke, and I never gave it the rest that it deserved. But my shoulders are fine now, so the surgery did help. But this right knee is still, I have to be really, really careful not to do too many jumps or run or anything like that with that knee.
And then I have 2 more questions. Tell us about your grad school experiences and getting a PhD. Has that been helpful? What do you think about that?
Well, I wouldn't say the PhD is really helpful for anything other than your own resilience. So I graduated from GCU in 2013 with a bachelor's degree, and then I stayed as a graduate assistant for a couple of years. Did my master's, and I think the master's degree was really helpful. But then it took me 9 years to get my PhD. Of course, mainly because in 2016 I moved away from the US, so I only had like 1 year of in-campus experience, and then for the next 3 years I had to spend some time, a week or two in the US just studying. But rest of the research and all of that, I was just doing, in my office alone, uh, uh, sending emails to people in the US. So again, it's very nice to say that I have a PhD and I was really interested on the topic that I did it. But I would say after 5 years of studying the same stuff, that was quite enough. And then the last 4 years, I really had to dig deep to get it done. So yeah, the last I would say last 6 years of my PhD, I just wrote the book, but I did get it done, and everybody can find it from the internet if you're interested about the research.
Can I have a piece of advice? Oh,
Yes,
I will
yes.
just ask a piece of advice. As a parent, what is your best advice? That sometimes we keep on encouraging our children to swim, and it comes to a point that sometimes they are lazy and keep on making excuses, and they say, and they always say, we know that they are already annoyed. Oh, di ba? As a swimmer, what is your experience? And what should we do to help the swimmers to encourage them to go to swimming always and train?
To train
Yeah.
again as a parent, and I don't have kids that age, so I can just talk about what I go through with my age group kids. We have to define, okay, what is it that you want from swimming? So it doesn't really matter what the goal is, but the better they can understand. And of course, when they're 11, they don't really understand that. But as they're going towards high school, they need to understand that if they want something, there's a process of getting that. And again, how to do that, but is up to question, but somehow making it really clear that okay, you say you want to achieve this goal, you want to make national cut or swim under a minute in 100 freestyle, whatever that goal is. And then the coach and also the parents have to insist that okay, unless you do it this way, it's not going to happen. So again, the better you can instinct, put this kind of process orientation into the kid, the better the result will be. But at the same time, like I probably said many times during my lecture here, it's really hard for a parent or a coach or anyone else to put this intrinsic motivation, the motivation that comes from the inside, into the swimmer. You can give the framework and make them understand, at least when they're like 14, 15 years old, that okay, you want this goal, then there's just no other option than do the work that is required to get there. And me, how I would approach it with age group athletes is like it is up to you. In my club, you don't have to come to practice, but then when you fail in the competition, I am also not afraid to tell them that, okay, these are the reasons why you did not make your goal. So, in my mind, you're not really wanting the goal because you're not willing to do the work. Not in a mean way, but it is just the fact of life that if you want something, you need to work on it. And then approaching it from a different perspective really quickly is, of course, that probably there are moments in every athlete's life and week and months where they are really inspired to go to the pool. So again, using this YouTube example, if I watch 2004 Kosuke Kitajima, I don't know if you know that, but breaststroke or swimming,
Yeah.
I want to go to the pool immediately. So somehow, like finding these inspiration moments of other great swimmers, this might be a tool that coaches and parents can use on a swimmer when they don't want to swim. Okay.
Thank you so much.